Have you ever found yourself feeling isolated even in a room full of people? Like your thoughts, the deeper you go into them, the further you drift away from everyone around you. It's not just your imagination. History has a strange relationship with deep thinkers, one where their brilliance often leads them to be pushed aside or even feared. It's not that they're wrong, it's that they're too right, too sharp, too unsettling. Think about some of the greatest minds in history: Socrates, Galileo, and more recently, people like Tesla and Nietzsche. They all had one thing in common. They saw the world differently, and that made society uncomfortable. And it's not because they were wrong. It's because their truths challenged the very fabric of what most people wanted to believe. But what makes society resist deep thinkers so vehemently? Why does intelligence, more than anything else, seem to trigger a negative response? Let's dive into this. The curse of insight. We all know that feeling, when someone makes a profound observation that shifts your entire perspective, leaving you both amazed and, maybe, a little uncomfortable. Deep thinkers live in that state of constant revelation. They see patterns, connections, and truths that the average person doesn't. And while that may sound like a gift, it can feel more like a burden. The philosopher Schopenhauer called this the curse of insight. While others enjoy the comfort of ignorance, deep thinkers cannot escape the truth of what they see. But what exactly makes insight so isolating? It's because intelligence doesn't just challenge ideas, it challenges egos. Think about it. If you've ever been in a conversation with someone who knows more than you, you've probably felt it. A sense of insecurity, a subtle discomfort. You don't just disagree with them. You feel as though you are being compared, even if they haven't said a word. This reaction, deep down, is a defense mechanism. We all want to feel competent, and when we are confronted with someone who outshines us intellectually, it's like a threat to our very identity. Psychological resistance to deep thinking. But why does intelligence provoke such discomfort? Studies show that humans are hardwired to fear what they don't understand. Our brains are naturally wired to be more at ease with what's familiar, what we've grown up with, what we can predict. And deep thinkers challenge that predictability. They force us to question things that most people take for granted. The more intelligent someone is, the more they cause others to confront their own limitations. It's not the knowledge itself that's threatening. It's the fact that others are made painfully aware of how much they don't know. In a world where most people are content with superficial answers, deep thinkers ask questions that don't have easy answers. They bring complexity to a world that prefers simplicity. And that can be unsettling. This is where the psychological concept of the mirror effect comes into play. A deep thinker, just by being present, mirrors the limitations of others. The person who's used to surface-level conversations suddenly feels exposed, as if their intellect is being put to the test. The defense? Rejection. It's easier to dismiss or shut down someone who makes you feel small than to face the discomfort that their insights provoke. The intellect versus social acceptance. This is where the real tension arises. Intelligence and social acceptance don't always go hand in hand. It's not just about being smart, it's about fitting in. We all crave social approval, and people who are intellectually gifted often find themselves on the outside because they simply don't conform. In social situations, confidence trumps intellect. Those who speak with certainty, even if their ideas lack depth, often become the ones people follow. Have you ever noticed that the loudest voices in a group are often the least informed? The person who talks the most, even if they're spewing nonsense, is often more admired than the quiet observer who holds valuable insights. This is the paradox deep thinkers face. They are surrounded by people who value confidence over knowledge. This disconnect between deep thought and social connection isn't new. It's a pattern that repeats throughout history. Whether it's the philosophers of ancient Greece or the intellectuals of the Renaissance, thinkers who challenged the status quo were often labeled as troublemakers, misfits, or even madmen. The role of fear and the survival instinct. At its core, the rejection of intelligence stems from our primal survival instincts. Humans evolved to thrive in groups, and group harmony was essential for survival. In early human societies, it was the collective wisdom of the tribe that ensured safety. But in modern times, intelligence has become more of a threat than a tool for survival. When a deep thinker challenges the group's ideas, they disrupt the social fabric. Their very presence questions the status quo, making others feel vulnerable. This triggers the brain's fear response, not because the ideas are dangerous, but because they force the individual to confront the uncomfortable possibility that their beliefs might be wrong. And in a group setting, being wrong isn't just an intellectual failure, it's a social one. People instinctively fear the social consequences of being wrong or feeling out of place. The neuroscience of social rejection. There's actual neuroscience behind this reaction. Research shows that when people are faced with the intellectual superiority of others, the same areas of the brain that are activated in response to physical threats are also triggered. This means that deep thinkers aren't just met with intellectual resistance. They're faced with a primal, fear-based rejection. It's not just about feeling inferior. It's a direct threat to one's place in the social order. In a way, the deep thinker is viewed as an outsider, someone whose presence is not only uncomfortable, but potentially dangerous to the group's survival. This is why intellectuals often find themselves alone, even when surrounded by people. The very nature of their thinking makes others feel exposed, as though they've been caught in a lie. The paradox of the intellectual. But here's the twist. While intelligence leads to isolation, it's also the very thing that drives innovation, progress, and discovery. The greatest minds throughout history, those who shaped our world, often lived on the fringes of society, not because they lacked the intelligence to fit in, but because their intellects were simply too much for the average person to handle. This paradox, being both revered and rejected, exists because the world often values comfort over truth. In a society that thrives on consensus, deep thinkers are the ones who upset the delicate balance. They push against the boundaries of the known world and ask questions that many would rather avoid. What can deep thinkers do? So, what does all of this mean for deep thinkers? How can you cope with the isolation that often accompanies your intellectual journey? First, embrace solitude. Schopenhauer suggested that for deep thinkers, solitude isn't a punishment. It's an opportunity to delve deeper into your ideas and pursue your passions without the distractions of social approval. Second, find your tribe. Look for like-minded individuals who value deep thought and intellectual engagement. Seek communities, whether online or in person, that appreciate complexity and nuance. Lastly, choose your battles. Recognize that not everyone is ready for the insights you bring to the table. Sometimes the best approach is to wait for the right moment or the right audience. Not every conversation needs to be a philosophical debate. Conclusion. Deep thinkers are often seen as misfits, but their struggle is not just social, it's existential. They are cursed with insight, driven by a need for truth that pulls them further from the world of comfort and conformity. But it's this very isolation that often leads to their greatest contributions. The challenge, however, is to learn how to live in a world that fears the very thing that makes you unique, your intelligence. And maybe that's the ultimate paradox. The more you understand, the lonelier it becomes. But in that loneliness, you also discover the beauty of seeing the world for what it truly is.